everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Cloudcast. I'm your host, Tyler Bower. I'm with my esteemed colleague, Seth Ellertson. Say something funny, Seth.
Happy Monday, everybody.
Happy Monday. Today we have with us a fine gentleman by the name of Christopher
Might be a little bit
Cleary.
of a stretch. A fine
Yeah, I was
gentleman.
going to try and think of his middle name, but I don't know.
Well,
You look like a Christopher Edward Cleary. I don't know.
Christopher Benjamin Cleary.
What's
middle
the
name's
middle name?
McAndrew. That's my middle.
McAndrew?
Yeah, it's a last name. So
That was my next guest. All right. Well, Chris, we've known each other a long time, but tell the people what they want to know. Tell them your origin story. How did you become to be McKendry Cleary?
I'd be happy to, Tyler. First of all, appreciate you inviting me on the podcast. Really excited to talk technology with you and Seth today. How did I get into technology? So it goes quite a ways back, actually, to when I was a little kid, growing up, a kid of parents and grandparents who owned distribution and manufacturing businesses. And from a young age, I was eager to help out within the warehouses, within the back office, and really had a front row seat to how distribution companies work. Doing that while growing up in the 90s, of course, I got a front row seat to seeing how technology impacted how distribution companies worked. And so from that early age, really found an interest in how technology transforms companies and makes them more efficient and scalable, and saw how some of my family's companies did that, and kind of sparked an interest that I've continued to pursue. And from there, grew into more technology focused roles, kind of out of the warehouse, and eventually ended up fully focused on delivering business software to companies very similar to those. It's been quite the journey, and really excited to see kind of that next iteration as we get into some of the really cool things on the horizon here for technology in the next 10 to 15 years.
So third gen family business. Tell me, what was Thanksgiving dinner like at that table?
A lot of bosses sitting around the table.
Yeah, right?
Absolutely,
Like,
yeah.
who got the mashed potatoes first? That's what I want to know.
Who do you think got the mashed potato? The one sitting at the head of the table, of course.
Nice. No, that had to come with its own challenges, right? So like cutting your teeth with a family business. What made you break away? What made you decide to not, stay in that business?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think what I had an opportunity to do within those businesses was to kind of see how technology transformed them, but also to see what some of the challenges were, right? A kind of aging workforce that maybe is a little bit resistant to some of that technology. I was a part of a team who was boots on the ground and kind of rolling up their sleeves and training people, and I get a little bit of that passion for education from my mom, who actually was a teacher for 35 years. I think that I found a blend
Shout out all
of
the teachers. Shout out.
yeah, shout out to all the teachers. Absolutely. I think I found a really great blend in kind of combining education, technology, as well as my acumen for business in business software, and kind of delivering that and utilizing and training customers on that. So that was my passion, and I kind of decided to continue to pursue that.
Nice. And so you left and then you started your own company, is that right?
So I kind of uniquely had an opportunity where my leaving was actually to go work for and with, and eventually I ended up purchasing their VAR at the time. So several of those companies kind of shared a single VAR in the same region, and had an opportunity to go work directly for that VAR, and that kind of began my separation. Companies that I worked for became my customers in a true sense, and eventually again had an opportunity to take over and purchase that company. Then really it was really as cloud was starting to impact the industry, and kind of took that opportunity in purchasing that company to look at some of the next generation technologies like cloud and SaaS software, and kind of began my journey over the next 7 years before becoming introduced to Net at Work, where eventually I sold that company and was brought in through acquisition, and now head up the Acumatica practice, one of our next generation products.
Shout out Net at Work.
Shout out Net at Work.
Hey, Chris, a couple questions. That's really interesting. I didn't realize that So your family's companies ran ERP solutions, legacy, we won't name names, but
Yeah.
legacy solutions, and they had VARs that were providing that.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
you eventually
Yeah.
got involved with those VARs?
Yeah, it was a single, and ended up became a single VAR. So they had multiple VARs. They eventually, worked really well with one of the VARs who had an opportunity to kind of consolidate. So they had, I think, about 8 companies at the time that were leveraging ERP services through that single VAR. And that VAR kind of approached our family's companies and said, "Hey, look, we have a position that's opening up that we think Chris would be great for, and eventually, we think there's kind of a long-term opportunity here potentially if he and you guys are interested." So
Very cool.
it was kind of the opportunity to transition, but still stay involved, of course, right? I had some 5 or 6 of my customers were, of course, my family companies. So it was a unique situation where I was able to kind of make a transition, but still stay impactful in the work that I had begun. So
Really cool. Really
yeah,
cool. So were you involved in actually helping your family's companies move to cloud native
yeah,
solutions?
absolutely. Those were my first ERP implementations.
Wow,
I
that's
did it
cool.
from
With your family, how'd that
yeah,
go?
yeah. So
More importantly, when you now owned the company and controlled the applications that ran your business, I bet you got the mashed potatoes first then.
I did get a better seat at the table. How about
Good,
that, Tyler? There
good,
you go.
good.
No, Seth, it's definitely something where, as a customer, doing an implementation, I was able to see uniquely what some of the challenges were. Again, I mentioned, none of the companies were exactly the same. So it was a good variety of seeing, maybe one organization that was better positioned to do an implementation better. And we can talk about what makes people successful here. Or again, kind of the opposite side of the spectrum, maybe an organization that wasn't quite ready and what were some of the challenges that they faced, and, things like resistance from staff to change, and how do we overcome that? And so those were my first lessons that I was able to kind of continue to learn from in my career from there. And, but of course, being family, you get a little bit of an extra leeway and rope in kind of figuring some of those things out. So
Your
they were
family's
good.
very different from mine. I wouldn't have additional leeway in my family, but
Yes, no, I mean, to a certain extent, there's definitely those family dynamics. Let's just say they definitely had the highest discount on their software renewals over any other of our customers.
Nice. Nice. Well, and I think that's so cool how you then, were able to carve your own path, right? Outside but still be, related to that family business. I think that's so awesome. What drove the decision to then consolidate into Net at Work? Like, I'm sure that was a major decision for you.
Yeah, this was about 3 years ago now. So at the time, it was a lot of things that we saw happening within the industry. And I think on an upcoming podcast, Tyler, you'll talk a little bit more in detail around kind of what are the industry trends that are driving this. But even a few years ago, it was pretty obvious that this was the direction the industry was going, where there was going to be a lot of consolidation, especially in some of these newer products like the Acumatica product that we were focused on selling. Whenever there's consolidation, we've kind of seen this in other technology ecosystems in the past, right? Kind of the first server-based technologies in the 90s. When you see this consolidation, you really do want to be amongst the top partners, right? 1, 2, or 3, to be able to maintain the level of quality for implementation and services, and to be able to maintain the level of influence that you have with your publishers. There's all of these things that we're able to provide to our customers as true tangible benefits that really only the top partners are able to provide. So that was something that, for me, having some of my family companies as customers, they truly were still they became Net at Work customers. So it was a really important decision for me to bring them to an organization where they would have support for the next 10 to 15 years from a leading technology partner that I felt comfortable putting my own businesses right in the hands of that organization. For me, it was kind of recognizing some of the industry trends that were happening, but also knowing the type of organization that we had an opportunity to join, and feeling really comfortable about making that decision. Again, not only with my employees, with my other customers, but some of those being family companies as well.
Great. No, that's great stuff. And, I'm happy you're here because, now we get to hang out
Yeah.
and talk shop. It's awesome. Mm, So that kind of brings us into our topic. And today, I think we wanted to talk about really what is driving and stalling technology decision making in 2025. You know, 2025, I think, is really going to be a transformational year for a lot of businesses. We have all collectively on this call, probably between us, have 60 plus years of technology experience, right? And we've seen a lot of changes, a lot of new ideas, a lot of new ways of thinking, a lot of new ways to do things. But a lot of times adoption of those ideas, right, aren't necessarily just grabbed a hold of and taken right away. Some do, but I think, I learned this best when, 13, 14 years ago, I began in the cloud industry, and that, I guess that makes me like a cloud dinosaur. I don't know, but it became very interesting to me, the dynamic of how customers adopted these things. And really, in my opinion, it takes us into, a use case of meeting customers and talking to customers where they're at today and understanding that transformation. We look at customers in 5 buckets. We look at them as kind of, I call them huggers, right? They want to hold on to everything that they have, right? And everything needs to stay in place exactly how it is. We have questioners who are really starting to think and be curious about new ways to do things. We have believers who are really looking at, I've got a path that I want to take, and now I want to start that path. Then we have evangelists who are really saying, yes, I made it. I'm there. What's driving that? And because even in 2025, new ideas, cybersecurity, AI, SaaS software, cloud computing, automation, they're all there. But what's stalling it? What's driving adoption of those with small business today?
I think that was the longest question I have
I
ever heard,
know.
Tyler.
I
That was literally
happen,
like a 7-minute question.
listen, if I had a superpower, it would be rambling for sure.
Well, where do you want to start? Do you want to start in what's stalling or kind of what's driving? I mean, they both kind of give you two perceptions on where we are today, because I do think that's the ultimate decision of the last several years and the next several years is, timing around when do I make this transition, and what are some of the challenges or accelerators to that decision?
Yeah, I think let's start with stalling, right? And with what's driving to showcase some positivity and where we can go. But, what's stalling? What's making companies do nothing?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I would say is, of course, and we've seen this kind of systemically for the this cloud transition, is just that fear of change. I think you called them huggers there in your categorization of them, again, I think that's just, and I don't know that it's necessarily even the decision makers' fear of change. It's more the organizational's fear of change and their ability to adapt to that change, or the fear of the resistance within an organization to adapt to that change. No leader wants to kind of top down push an initiative where at every level they're going to feel resistance within an organization, right? Those are the types of decisions, even if it's in the best interest of the organization, that ultimately sometimes don't get made because of that fear. So I think, one of the things that customers or prospects, really kind of need to kind of analyze is, where are we on that spectrum of adaptability and resistance to change? And, is that really what's driving our decision, or really preventing us from making the right decision for our organization? And if that's the case, then that's really where you've got to hyper focus on, in the infrastructure within your organization where you don't have that resistance. And that could mean having those conversations now and saying, hey guys, we need to prepare for this. This is an inevitability. This is something we have to do. So what can we do now to support you in ultimately this process that we are going to get to, right? Having those conversations, bringing in consultants that can kind of create that initial foundation of adaptability and readiness for
So
that.
let's start at the beginning. Do you think, let's stay there, right? So fear, risk, stagnation, right? That those are all things that we want to avoid, especially as all of these compounding, factors influence behavior, right? So doing nothing really isn't an option anymore,
Yeah,
right? We
agreed.
have to do something. The question becomes, are you seeing that most of that stagnation or hugger mentality is happening at the mid-level management, like IT managers, finance managers, that level, or is it happening at the executive level?
I think what we're seeing is it's probably less so at the executive level. I think the
Really?
executives,
Okay.
well, I think the fear is at the executive level, but I think the resistance, or where they perceive the resistance, is not at the executive level. I think most executives at this point see the value in cloud-based technologies and some of these next-gen technologies and how that will impact their organization. I think kind of as you move down, that resistance goes up. The mid managers, the mid kind of tier of an organization, I think 4, 5, 6 years ago were much more resistant than they are now. I think that's what we're starting to see. I think that's the shift that's happening as we see this accelerate. It's kind of that next tier down is starting to shift towards seeing more of the value than some of the negative impacts. I think ultimately when we get down to the kind of end users, the boots on the ground, whether that's on the manufacturing line, whether that's in the field for a field service customer, whether that's in the warehouse for one of our distribution customers or at the counter, those team members is where we still need to do that education to really kind of show them, lead them to the light, so to say, of this is the true positive impacts that you're going to see, kind of re-educate them around some of the myths and some of the negative impacts, the perceived negative impacts, because I think ultimately that level is still the main source of resistance, and the executive team ultimately again makes the wrong decision in not choosing to move forward and staying in place because of the fear of that resistance from the mid and lower levels.
Interesting. So what you're saying is, you, in your opinion, most executive teams know the destination. They
So
understand the risk. They understand what happens with stagnation, but the fear, if what I'm interpreting correctly, is upsetting the apple cart of the current process.
yeah, absolutely. Whether it's a new executive team that comes in that doesn't feel that they have the social capital within the organization to kind of force that change. I mean, because again, nobody wants a failed implementation. Ultimately, that's a lose-lose situation for everybody, right? So the fear of that failed implementation, due to the resistance of the team members to participate, because of course, one of the key indicators to a successful implementation is the lack of resistance that you have through an organization, right? So it's the fear is well founded, right? I think ultimately what we have to do is we have to put steps in place to mitigate that fear, to reverse that fear, to get to re-educate whatever areas of the organization that need that education to the positives of what that change will be.
Hey, Chris, one of the things you talk about the fear in changing, and one of the things that we've been doing this a long time that I think is changing is I believe that the cloud-based technologies are actually easier to implement. They come oftentimes pre-configured for industry needs, things like that. I think that a lot of that fear of sort of failure is some legacy noise that used to
Absolutely.
exist when products were more complicated. You think that's a fair statement?
I think it's a very fair statement, Seth. I think I used the term re-education there a couple times because I truly do think it is um, it's misrepresentation of the current state. I agree with you. I think it's some legacy kind of holdover mentality. As we talk about some of the accelerators on why customers are choosing now as the right time to switch, it is because of some of the things you mentioned, the implementation, methodologies, the tools, the systems themselves are much more friendly to
More
customers to
advanced.
implement. Absolutely. And so for those customers who are willing and wanting that change and those new technologies, they're able to self-consume a lot of those things, from online videos to universities that give free online training courses for a lot of these products that just didn't exist in previous implementations. So yes, there's a ton of tools that, including AI, that we're starting to see that's going to impact the ease of implementation for these tools. Yeah.
So one of the things that we were talking about is you have to do something. You can't be stagnant. Why? Why do companies have to do something? Why do you think companies need to change the cornerstone ERP application that they're running if it's a legacy application, Chris?
Before Chris goes, I'll just shout out a plug. You want to know one reason? Watch our first episode with Adam Kahn. That's a big one.
Security, and
Security.
that was
That was going to be
yeah,
on my
for
list.
sure, for sure.
Like, you look at some of the statistics around data breaches, and especially around small and medium-sized businesses that are still on-premise technologies. I mean, it's astounding. It's doubling, tripling every year, right? And not slowing down. So I think technology and security specifically uh, is something that's a main driver of that. But I think it's all the other technologies that, unfortunately, legacy systems are just not going to be able to adapt. They did a good job bridging the gap for EDI and some of these other kind of next gen technologies in the middle. But one thing they're not going to be able to bridge the gap for: artificial intelligence,
Yeah,
machine learning, right? Some of these automation engines that are starting to be built based on some of these foundational technologies. Those things are transformational shifts in the technology landscape that those companies are not going to be able to adapt. And so, imagine not adopting email way back at the beginning, or not adopting e-commerce, strategies at the very beginning of some of that. Those are the types of things that I think customers hopefully have learned their lesson, and they don't want to miss out on those types of transformational technologies the next time. Now's the time to get that foundational ERP in place, so that as these technologies become truly impactful in the next, we're not talking 5 years, folks, we're talking 18 months, as they start to become
the speed of
impactful.
technology with AI is just incredible,
Yeah,
incredible pace.
I just came back from a summit in January where they previewed AI features that will be rolling out in the next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, that are going to have true tangible impacts on the daily lives of our users. So that's something that, you can't miss out on. You can't not take credit cards, right?
That's right.
You
That's
can't,
right.
right? You have to have some of these types of technologies. So
Yeah. Hey, the other shift you mentioned shift, and the other thing shift that I think is relevant here that comes up from time to time is we are seeing the retirement of the boomers at unprecedented rates. The amount of people retiring right now in the world is never before see these rates, and it's the baby boomers who are getting to retirement. How does that play into this whole discussion on transformation of technology, Chris?
yeah, one of the main drivers is just that. It's the aging out of, some of the baby boomers out of the workplace. And really it's also how work and remote work is done in today's world, right? So it's the phasing out of a generation, but it's also the transformation post COVID of how we do work. And that's mobile access, that's mobile accessibility, it's having secure ways to do.
Secure
Yeah,
connectivity.
exactly. To have that mobile accessibility. It's about data availability and, visibility into information, right? For those new generation that are coming in that don't have the 30 years experience and the muscle memory when it comes to, I know what I need to order from this vendor on this month because I've been doing it for 35 years, right? So the next generation, needs data. They need accessibility to that data. They need to be able to work how they work in order to be, really be successful. Otherwise, companies are going to have a very hard time attracting top end talent, right? They're going to, the top end talent is going to go to companies and organizations who have the technology that allow them to work the way they want to work, right? Which is, in this kind of remote hybrid world, but also they want to have access to data. That it's something that, when you hire, Gen Z workers, they can't work on blue screens, right? Like, they need interaction, they need data, they need to be able to, kind of work with these systems the way that you can in these next generation technologies. Otherwise, they burn out, and they burn out quickly, and you're just turning over, team members, one after another in this kind of endless, cycle. And ultimately, that's going to stagnate an organization and be a competitive disadvantage for it.
I just want to say, shout out boomers. We love our boomers. Beth, you're a boomer, aren't you?
Ah,
No, I think that's a great point. I think it's a great point. Now, do me a favor. Let's reverse it, because your answer originally was the executive team gets it, wants it, understands where they're going, but they're facing resistance at the mid-level and the actual first level of the organization. I actually, from my perspective, see it differently. I see in the SMB space an actual tangible understanding of what it could do. I think they understand what it does, but I don't think they understand the actual tangible cost analysis of how it could impact future growth, how it can speed up and automate new positions in that growth, and really what tangibly could happen if they do nothing. I actually see the mid-level driving that urgency based on, being in other positions or other companies who had similar routes. And so they're faced with trying to convince the executive team to really prioritize. And the pushback of nothing usually comes back to, a budget conversation, or comes back to a well, we want to do these things this year. This just didn't get
Prioritization.
cut,
Yeah.
right?
Sure.
There's things that are happening, put your mind into like a customer who is using legacy software and purchasing hardware and, managing it internally and, buying all these machines. And so you put yourself in that mode. What are they comparing the alternatives to? Right. So when you look at that customer, they're comparing it to what they're spending today, but the perceived risk is where I'm finding it very difficult, or maybe a disconnect in what is the actual cost analysis of doing nothing. So tell me, like, what would you, if you had a room full of executives right now of small businesses, and they're curious, right? They're questioners, they're asking questions. But when you think about asking, or trying to give a nugget to that executive leadership team, like, how do you convince them? Like, what
what's that
should they be thinking about? Why should they prioritize this?
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I think we are very much aligned. When I made the statement that I think the executive team sees the value in it, I would agree with you that I don't know that I think it's more of a blanket statement, value. I don't know that they do really understand the true impact of the technology, and especially when it comes to understanding how to prioritize that decision on when to move, right? I think even the business owners or executive team members that decide to stay, that make that decision not to move, I bet you most of them would say, "Oh yeah, it would be great to do that. I can see the value. I know it would be better in these ways." But I agree with you, Tyler. It's very difficult for them to articulate what are those ways, and what is the actual tangible impact from a dollar's perspective, in order to prioritize why I need to do this now, not wait for anything else that happens in 2025, or why it really should have already happened in 2024.
Like, you have a customer or a company in the small business world. They have all these different factors, and they're all listed individually, but they're all directly connected. That's the biggest aha moment, is when, and unfortunately, a lot of times when I talk to executives, that connection of all of those decisions and the tangible risk and ROI of those decisions doesn't happen until an actual event takes place.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
Triggering event.
So
Yeah.
what are we faced with this year? Windows 10 end of life.
Yeah.
That's happening.
Yeah.
Like, there's a hard deadline on that, right? Of this year, October, right? September, October, I forget. But that means that when everybody back in COVID bought all those computers and all those machines, we did it in kind of a panic, because we're like, oh my God, everybody's got to work from home. Panic button, right? Let's buy everything. They're all coming end of life, and now that operating system is over as well. Cybersecurity compounding at a compounding rate. I mean, we saw a stat in our last episode from Adam Kahn: 85% of small businesses will be impacted in 2025. 25 or 85%. The average cost of a ransomware attack, $250,000, right? Crazy. AI, right? You have publishers that we're all aware of that are impacting business process and automating and moving ahead items within AI that is unheard of. I'm now doing research on AI sales automation within AI. There's so much out there. Do you think that maybe they're just overwhelmed?
Yeah, there's definitely some analysis paralysis that ends up happening, right? Even when we kind of very specifically talk about the ROI, I think the challenge is that these technologies are so transformative, it's almost hard to, even for us as experts, to estimate the impact and where the impacts are going to be, because you almost don't see them until you are utilizing the technologies, right? Like I think of customers who build automation workflows, or I'm thinking of a customer who has a right now, as an example, who has a field service implementation or a field service division. They're sending text message notifications to their before their technicians are going on site with names, pictures, confirm or not confirm. Like that type of workflow, this type of customer never really envisioned before, right? So when we talked about, how many less cancellations are you going to have on site, which of course wastes time, gas, energy for the technician, all of these things. Like it's almost something we can't even quantify without actually even putting that process in place because it didn't even exist previously, right? So it's almost, the executive teams want to try to find every dollar they're going to save, and it's almost an impossible task for them to do, truly. In my opinion, the real way to look at this analysis is look at some of your peers, look at some of these customers who have gone through this transition and has done it 5 years ago. Ask them how it impacted their business, and ask them that question, like when you sat there making that decision versus 5 years from now. And most of them, at least the ones I talked to, will say, I couldn't even tell you the ways it was going to impact my business, the new processes that we rolled out, the new divisions or new services that we were able to provide to our customer because now we had the tool to do that or the support to do that. Or, we were able to see within our data something that we never really saw before. I'm thinking of one of my regional Jan Sand customers here in Western New York who, once they were able to get live on Acumatica and see their data from a purchasing perspective, one of the hardest things for them to purchase was salt. It's super hard to predict when and what and how much to buy for a season like a winter season in Buffalo, especially at the volumes that they were. They were able to look at their data and analyze kind of buying trends day over day, week over week, and adjust and save over $1 million in costs of salt over a 12-month period that they would not have been able to really even know that they wasted or didn't sell at the right dollars of price, essentially, because it moves throughout the season, right? So it's just this constant game for them on having to buy it at the right cost, sell it at the right price, and without any visibility into data, it was a very difficult process. So I think those are small examples of the changes and the impact that you can't really analyze in an ROI analysis when you're sitting down trying to make this decision. But you're right, Tyler, budget ends up becoming one of the main reasons why they, and I think it's that prioritization of spending the dollars now versus those unknown impacts that you can't really foresee.
And
You almost have to trust your gut.
yeah, and I think too, like one of the traits of companies that are really thriving are companies that aren't turning off that curiosity and evaluation, right?
Absolutely.
So like 10 years ago, technology decision making was easy. You did it once every 4 years, right? 20 years ago, oh, it's time to buy some new stuff, right? And it was really looked at differently. And now today, just because you got to the next kind of plateau, maybe you were legacy and you now went to a cloud, you virtualized all of your infrastructure, you added a cybersecurity policy in place and working with a partner there. all those things, great. But now you still have to be evaluating, because I see this a lot with customers as we begin to help transform. They stop,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And what you're doing is you're assuming that technology isn't going to catch up, or these threats and these outside pressures aren't going to catch up. Constant evaluation in that process is a trait that I see within companies that really are thriving. And that starts with leadership. That starts with executives prioritizing that. If not for anything else, but to have clear measurables about what success looks like and making sure we're on trend. And technology is a huge part of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's an increasingly more and more bigger piece of that, right? And as AI and automation and some of these trends continue um, to continue to infiltrate really our everyday processes, I think our reliance on technology in a lot of the good ways, right? In good ways is going to continue to increase. So that constant analysis is required, I would argue, for customers to survive going forward. I tell customers all the time, I kind of use this as an analogy. Like, look at your technology as an employee of yours, right? I mean, you're reviewing your employees' performance every day, right? What are the ways that I can improve that employee's performance? What are the, investments that I can make to get the most out of my employees, right? I want to make sure that I'm maximizing my spend on my employees. I want to pay my employees well, especially the good ones that I'm getting a lot of value out of. I'm investing in them. I'm not afraid to spend that money because, of course, they're producing, right? Your ERP is probably your most valuable employee at this point now for most
Look at it that way.
organizations, right?
Yeah.
From the processes that they run, including sending out invoices, a lot of our systems are now doing, right? They send out invoices, they send out reminders, right? They're helping with collections. They're sending out, shipment notifications. They're sending out statements to customers. They're helping with customer service. So like they are starting to onboard more and more functions within an organization, allowing your people to do more and more of the specialized, important roles, right? We don't see this mass replacement from this technology. It's more of a displacement to other more impactful tasks that your employees are able to focus on. But ultimately, that system is performing a lot of tasks within your organization. So investing in that, making sure you're optimizing that, updating that on a go-forward basis so that you're taking advantage of the latest and greatest in technology and security and all of these things is going to be super important for the successful companies, in my opinion. I would agree.
For sure. And Chris, there's so many questions I want to ask there. Unfortunately, the podcast dollars are not yet paying the bills yet. So I still have a daytime job I got to do.
I
So
gotcha.
I got a
Yeah,
pretty hard stop here.
Seth's
But
giving me the
Tyler,
look. I
The
gotcha.
music's
Listen,
playing.
listen. I want to leave you with this, Chris, real quick, off the cuff. Promise this wasn't rehearsed. I'm a small business. I want to thrive in 25. Trademark that. What are top 3 things I should focus on? 3 things. If I can accomplish 3 things as a small business executive in 2025, what should I focus on?
Of course, there's going to be, Tyler, is it just within technology? I think technology has to be one of those, right? I think if you kind of look at your top 3 priorities, you're going to have something focused around your team and labor and a lot of things that are going on there. Supply chain and the economic picture, there's going to be something there, whether you've got to cut costs or reduce over, whatever it is, right? There's going to be something there. Technology has to be one of those pillars in 2025. 2025 has to be the year that you set the foundation from a technology infrastructure perspective. So that's your hardware, that's your software, and that's your security. Okay. You have to get yourself to a foundational place so that you can start to adapt these technologies that are going to come very quickly in 2026 and 2027. And again, imagine we have the foresight now to see what AI is going to do in technology. We didn't really have that the first, iteration with the internet and e-commerce. Imagine being in front of those bubbles and knowing that this is a technology that's going to have that type of an impact. We know AI is going to do that. So 2025 has to be the year that you set your organization up so that moving forward, you have an e-commerce strategy, you have an AI strategy, you have a multi distribution channel strategy, all of these things that we know customers have needed to have, but absolutely must have going forwards.
Beautiful. So I'm going to wrap it up there. Chris said this earlier. It's not 3 years anymore. It's 18 months. I'll even shrink it down to the next 6 to be really thorough in where your path is going. So if you're a small business, mid-sized business, and you don't have a plan, get one immediately. This is the year. This is the last year of doing nothing. And the companies that are doing nothing are going to find themselves really, really chasing the rabbit about a mile ahead. So if you don't want to be behind the 8 ball, please, please, please figure out a plan and find somebody to help you if you need. I want to thank our guest, Chris Cleary. Thank you so much, McAndrew Cleary.
Andrew.
I'm calling you McAndrew from now on. Seth, thank you so much. Any closing remarks you want to make?
I'm late for another call. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Tyler.
Listen, thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. Remember, make my kids think I'm cool. Like and subscribe. And as always, go Birds.